Hey, welcome back. That video went a little faster than I anticipated. So this is video 2. Again, this is Saturday um, for you guys, Thursday night for me. So welcome back. And again, as we pay attention to details, we're stressing some things that are kind of important to our program. We just want to make sure that you understand that there is a foundation for personal growth here. Just had a quick conversation about monitoring your voice, your public voice that everybody can hear, um, and then your private voice. We spent a little bit more time talking about that private voice. And one thing on this document, it says that the content and the tone really need to kind of go hand in hand. And you think about those things. Think about the things that are inside of your head. What do you want to say? And then how do you want to say it? That's a very important process. So sometimes it's good, and we don't have time. Obviously, we're doing this in a video format, not really a one-on-one sit down in front of the group and have you guys sit down with a piece of paper and write some things out. But one thing that you could do to practice this in your own life is actually write out the things that you want to say to someone, and you can put it in situational aspects or relational aspects, like with your parents or something like that. So write down what you want to say and then write down how you want to say it, and then literally just practice that, and then do that with your mental voice too, your private voice. What do you want your inner voice to say to yourself? And then practice that, make that inner voice actually say those things. Give yourself some compliments, give yourself time to practice those things. All right, so I want to move on a little bit, and I don't want this to be as long per se, but we do talk about having some tools that are available to you. We don't just talk about character here. These are tools that you can actually put into practice, like situational things or, whatever it is. So I'm just going to go through some of these. So no matter what your character skill that you've chosen, and everybody in the room, I believe, has finished that character skills form. Again, I'm going to make those player cards for you at some point. And we give you some advice. So let's give you some advice. So first things first, best friend advice. We all have best friends, friends that we really confide in, and friends that whenever life happens and we want to turn to them and just discuss some things. And, I'm talking more about the heavier things about life, right? Like, who do you turn to whenever you've had a death in the family? Or who do you turn to whenever decisions that you've made are really crashing down on you, and you just feel like everybody's coming down, and you just feel negative. Like, who do you go to that you can actually have conversation with and live life with? And I want you to think about that person. And in those moments, whenever you've made maybe some bad decisions, or you just need some life advice, like big things are coming up, like what school you're going to be going to, or who you should be dating. Later in life, it's going to be, hey, what kind of house should I buy? What kind of car should I buy? I mean, there's some big decisions that you turn to your friends. And I want you to think about, I heard a pastor say that a lot of times whenever we're seeking advice for things, a lot of times we already know what we want to hear. And we go find the person that's actually going to tell us the thing that we want to hear. I'm not going to go through a lot of scenarios here, but I thought that was kind of interesting, because it's kind of true. Like, we have situations in our life that come up. We need to make a decision, and we kind of know what we want to do, but we want someone to affirm that and validate that. So we turn to our best friend and we say, hey, in my case, it might be Jeff or Brian, or I'll use Dan and Drew for a moment, seek their advice. And sometimes I want them to say what I'm already thinking. That's a good technique, to pretend like you are your best friend telling you advice that you want. So it's almost like role playing, right? So if your best friend's not physically with you, you just kind of flip that mental switch and pretend like you're talking to your friend. And what would your friend say to you? Well, that's what this is talking about. That's what this skill is what would your best friend say to you? What kind of advice would you get from your best friend? And chances are that's what you want to hear anyway. That's what you need to hear. And that affirms that inner voice instruction sometime, as long as you're starting to train that inner voice to be positive and encouraging and those type of things. It's going to give you the good advice in those tough situations. Okay. So That's a technique. So whenever something's happening and you've just decided what kind of skill you want to have in your life and you go out to live out that skill, sometimes you need to ask questions like, how am I going to do that? Well, you ask your best friend to do that and you give yourself some good advice. All right, the next one, letter B, says plan positive, identify the specific situation, label your content and tone. So I want you to think about, we've been talking about game situations whenever we're tired and exhausted and our voices are just not what they want to be. So let's do a game scenario for just a quick conversation. So there's going to be times whenever, you got 5 minutes left in the game and you're all in, you're trying to get that goal or you're trying to defend, whatever the situation is, it's going to be tough. Okay. So plan positive. It's going to happen. So what are you going to do in that situation whenever you have a player that's telling you where to go and that voice is just not what you want? Okay. It's not all pretty. It's not filtered. It's just in the moment. It's in the heat of the moment. The tone comes out. It's aggressive. It's gruff. It's all of those things. How are you going to react to that? I think that's important to have a plan, right? If you know that person, that teammate is just trying to, save the game or trying to win the game or whatever the situation is, that their level of passion is coming out. So, there's not an intent that's ill, right? It's not a bad intent on the front end. So let's not receive it that way. So whatever it is, whatever that situation is, plan for it. Play it out in your head. How is that going to play out? What do you think the outcome is going to be? Can you control the outcome? And if you can, plan for 2 or 3 different scenarios and how is that going to play out? And whenever it actually does happen, a lot of times it doesn't happen exactly like we planned it out. That's life, right? It all turns out differently, but you can plan for it. You can plan for different scenarios and you can just be on the front end of some of those tough situations and you already know how you're going to act because you've already played it out in your head. All right, letter C, replace the negative, acknowledge the thought, interrupt the thought, and replace the thought. This really gets with when you're trying to live a certain lifestyle, those character traits. And it's tough sometimes. You can find yourself in situations that are just awkward. They can be difficult. They can be uncomfortable, whatever they are. And you can start having those negative thoughts come into your head, like, oh, you shouldn't be here, you shouldn't do this, or you're trying to have this conversation with your parents, and it's a life conversation, you don't want to have that, and you start to have all these negative thoughts. The moment you start going through that stream of negative thoughts, the order is acknowledge what's going on. Hey, I recognize that's not a thought I need to have in my head. Interrupt it, just kind of shake it off, whatever. I know there's sometimes I'll be in the middle of teaching and I'll have some weird thoughts. I want to say something to a student and I shouldn't. So I acknowledge that it's in there and I literally just kind of shake my head. And sometimes I've had students ask me what I'm thinking. And I'm like, nope. And then I just replace it with something else and I'll just make something else up. So they have no idea what was really in my head. But I've done that process where I acknowledge that I shouldn't be thinking this way. I interrupt it. And then I replace it with something else. I replace it with a positive thought. I replace it with something that's totally unrelated, whatever it is. Letter D is the opportunity converter. Identify a situation and label it as an opportunity for growth. That's the typical turn the negative into positive, right? Find the silver lining in the cloud, if you want to use those phrases. That's really what this one is about, is find the opportunity in every difficult situation. There's always an opportunity to learn. There's always an opportunity to grow. And there's always an opportunity to practice the skills that you have said you want in your life. So find them, even whenever it's tough. Identify what that situation is that you're in and find some kind of way to pair your character traits that you're trying to get with that opportunity and seeing if you can grow through that, because everything can be used as a potential growth moment. And finally, the Don Meyer notebook. This is the last thing. And I talked about this in the last video. And that 30-second window popped up again already. So the Don Meyer notebook, that's an assignment that you're going to be doing anyway. So it's 2 things. What did you do well and why? And what can you do better? And how can you do that thing better? That is an assignment that you're going to be completing after every game starting on Monday. And that's something that I will be holding you accountable to and checking in your notebooks. All right, ladies, that's it. I'll talk to you later.